Welcome to another Monday Blitz. Today we look at another passage of scripture here found in 1 Samuel 21. And as I think about this passage and I think about how we think of David as this amazing son, actually, he's referred to as a begotten son of God, one created in God's image after God's own heart. And then we read a chapter like chapter 21 of 1 Samuel and it makes you wonder, how did God put up with David? David, man after God's own heart. And yet this chapter says so much about how confusing it can be when you get off track. Here David is, he goes to the priest. Now when you think about this, he goes to the priest and he asks for food. And in asking for food, he finds out that the only food there is food that had been set on in the tabernacle there and had been used as holy bread, showbread, and now it had been taken off of that table in the holy place and was now available for the priest and only the priest to eat. However, here's a fascinating thing I found out. In Jewish law, the preservation of life was of greater importance than nearly any of the commands written in Scripture and in their laws. And so David uses this argument that he will die if he does not receive this food. At the same time, he also receives the weapon that he had taken off of Goliath some time before. In his fear of being attacked by Saul, David has gone to the house of worship to seek God, to seek food, to seek protection. And yet, David fails to stay there. David fails to stay focused on receiving protection from God and instead decides he will take it into his own hands to protect himself against Saul. And he takes such wise actions. Think about these actions. He asks for Goliath's sword, which he takes with him, and then he chooses to flee to one of the 5 royal cities of the Philistines, and he happens to just pick the city that was Goliath's hometown. Wisdom, such wisdom there, David. Wow. Anywhere in the world to flee to, let's flee to the city of the place of the man you just killed. The city, the hometown, everyone there knows Goliath. Everyone knows who's killed Goliath, and that's where you flee. You know, I think our life sometimes probably looks the same as David's. We may shake our heads here today at David and go, really, David, what were you thinking? But how many of us live our lives and do things similarly, where we come up with these great plans of how to help ourselves, and we walk right into the enemy. We walk right into things that to an outsider seem so obvious. Why would you ever do that? That's the exact opposite of what you should be doing. You see, anytime we decide to take on a role that isn't ours, when we start trying to be God for ourselves, when we start trying to help God out because we don't believe He is strong enough, we put ourselves in terrible situations. We put ourselves in places that God never intended us to be. So what do? I hope we don't decide to follow David's plan and he tries to act insane and gets kicked out of Gath because he is so insane. I hope we learn from Scripture. I hope as we read Scripture, we find these truths and we go, let me stop trying to take care of things for God. Let me start relying on His protection, His leading, His guiding. I don't need to help God out. God has everything under control. I just simply need to follow Him. So I don't know what it is that you're going through. I don't know what it is that you're experiencing today. Maybe you're on a high. Maybe you are walking in the path with God and keep doing that. But maybe you're struggling a little bit. Maybe you've been trying really hard to help God out. My encouragement to you today is fall back in line following Jesus. He doesn't need us to direct the path. He's got that plan. And when we walk in His plans, He will be glorified, we will be blessed, and we will be a blessing to others. Until next time.